Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review a movie called Deadcon. I had watched this movie and previously reviewed this movie on another channel. So I'm coming on here a second time around reviewing this movie just because of how, interestingly enough, that movie just bizarrely picked up via uh, views and stuff like that. So I guess I'm like, you know what? I kind of want to go back into going to this now to see what was the fuss all about. Because I thought there were some interesting things within this film that kind of very much kind of felt a little bit of a copy and paste of a movie like The Shining, but also had some kind of paranormal activity elements going on with it. Uh, it kind of had this movie is a very much ghost story that involves a bunch of social media uh, high people in social media all deciding to go to this thing called a ViewCon, and we end up having these kids all going to this seemingly hotel to be a part of this ViewCon, and eventually we end up finding out that there is so much more going on than just this ViewCon within this hotel, within this complex, which is within this environment. We end up having a social media Ashley character called AKA Ashley really go from this sweet, innocent person to eventually going into this eye rolling, we're very concerned, what is she doing kind of character. And that is kind of interesting. We also have a character here, I believe, called Megan, that is juggling two men within this ViewCon. And so we have that interesting developmental story. And we also have Kara, who is also trying to take care of Ashley. And we are to eventually end up finding out how Ashley really feels about what she is doing. Yeah. Kind of, this movie could really, I think that they really should have chose actual social media YouTuber or whatever is in this movie, but more than likely they just kind of found whoever they could find to do this movie, to do it cheaply and whatever. But anyways, I thought that this movie was really interesting, but I don't really feel it 100% it kind of feels like if Blair Witch was not done in the woods, was done in a hotel complex. There's so many movies that just kind of compile and smash all into this one. To where it also feels like the Matthew Broderick movie War Games at some point, where we have a computer bizarrely in this movie that takes a life of its own for reasons that I don't quite understand. I'm not really quite understanding where we get the jump from evil computer to ghosts to ViewCon to all of this stuff is all just kind of jumbled and just kind of just put all in here together. To be brutally honest, as if somebody needed a portfolio thing to put into their portfolio to just try to make it into doing something more after this, is what I would have assessed and or tried to assume while someone was doing this movie. There is an interesting story going on with this film, but there also isn't enough there within this film. We have an abrupt ending. We have it to where it just kind of feels like we left a lot in the drawing board that we didn't actually get to anywhere. And we have it to where there is a hotel clerk of sorts that is trying to almost give us answers, but that is a journey of which just does not happen, sadly enough, within this movie. So, with that said, I think I have pretty much teed up this movie if people weren't aware of what this movie was about. Basically, a bunch of social media like people like YouTubers or Twitch people or video gamers or stuff like that, all stuck in this one hotel where eventually they will find out that there is something going on here. And there are some interesting scenes going on here, but with this movie overall, like, it kind of just leaves more to be desired. Like, I just don't quite understand the movie, and I feel like I need to like watch this movie on commentary to get like the writers like kind of connection with everything, or like I need some kind of like featurette or something to help me like get a better grasp of this movie, because it kind of just jumbles and kind of just puts together a lot of things that I don't feel quite totally connect with one another, and it leaves there to be just kind of a jumbled mess, to be brutally honest, within this movie. Uh, but if anything, we can just kind of decipher and or like make our own assessment of what this movie was trying to do, was trying to put together, and we could have interesting dialogues about what this movie was trying to do, if anything else. So with that said, I think I've talked about this movie cryptically long enough. So let's go into spoilers about this movie. Like, there's something about this concept that I think I enjoy, but yeah, like everything comes back to that same point of just like there was a lot left on the drawing room table for this movie. Like, it kind of felt like we needed like one thing to like connect the dots for this whole movie, and that never came. Like, we never had one person that like solved the riddle of this movie, and that's the thing where I think is missing out on this the most. Where we kind of have that like Blair Witch kind of ending as well. If you've ever seen the Blair Witch movie, so let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. So, we have at first a character called AKA Ashley, or just Ashley. It seems we have her go into uh, this hotel for this Yukon, and interestingly enough, we end up finding out right away that she is having a lot of problems with this room and so on and so forth. It gets really interesting with this character, I think, uh, when we have this character who ends up consistently going uh, into her into her room, and it's consistently in shambles, like if somebody vandalized it. But looking at it full well, I'm like, well, there's something wrong about this one singular room. It's like a 1408 John Cusack, Samuel Jackson. I hope it's 1408. I could be wrong about that. Situation with this woman, and how I think we had uh, a hotel clerk named Warren that was saying like, dude, like out of all the rooms, you shouldn't have had anybody going into this one room. Like, this is the worst room. And everybody was just like, meh, like, dude, like, we just want to count our money. Like, we don't care who goes into these rooms. All we care about is that uh, we just want to count our money, and we don't care about what the end result is of somebody dying in our rooms. So we end up having Ashley, who is to go into this room, and every time she comes back into it, she ends up finding it ransacked. She ends up calling a security guard, which they kind of brush it off as it just being like, well, uh, it must have just been that one of your fans must have just really liked you so much that they just took a joyride with your room. And how about we give you guys new key cards, and then like we'll just call the end of this, because as long as they didn't really and truly steal anything, then we'll just have this what it is. Because it seems like this AKA Ashley is a really popular YouTuber or a really popular social media person. Like, this kind of reminds me of the movie, I think it was called I Lived, where we had like a guy who ends up reviewing apps for a living on YouTube, and things aren't going well for him. So he ends up going into this one app, and then bizarrely everything starts to work out for him via using this app. And then he eventually like reviews it, and he's saying like, "Yeah, this is a great app" or whatever. And so we end up finding out that he like ends up almost like ruining his life because of how far this ends up going. Kind of reminds me of the movie 13 Sins, but um, really good movie. I actually really enjoyed it. If you can find it, good luck, because I don't know where that is anymore. But um, if I could find it somewhere and I could rewatch it, I probably will review it. If I haven't already through this channel, probably not. But I'll probably re-review it just because I actually enjoyed that movie. It was actually an interesting movie. I actually did like it. But anyways, so going into this movie, we have Ashley, who is in her hotel. It seems that the lights have all gone out in her room. We end up having Ashley calling the head desk, like, "Hey, my lights are going out. Like, can you send somebody up here to give me some new bulbs?" And so, funny enough, we have it to where this clerk, this restaurant clerk guy, doesn't even want to go in to the room. This is hilarious. We have a scene where this clerk is like trying to stay as close to the door as humanly possible, and Ashley isn't having no never mind about any of this. It's like, why is it that you won't go further on into the room? Is what I would ask this guy until he would give me an answer. Because I would just be like, why is it that, why is this guy hesitating so badly? Because we end up having this hotel clerk guy. He ends up switching the lights that are closest to the door, and he ends up giving the light bulbs to the girl to go and fix the rest of the lights in the apartment in the room. Like, dude, I would have been calling like whoever and just be like, dude, I should be getting a freaking discount or whatever. Like, this is horrible. Like, I'm losing electricity. Guys won't even come to fix things up. Like, dude, I'm having all kinds of wonky problems with this room. Could I get a different one, or could you just give me a discount on this? Because this is garbage. So we eventually have it to where it seems that uh, there are there is a point when Ashley had gotten some sigils of sorts that were drawn in makeup on Ashley's room, and so we have it to where Ashley is like really ticked off because it's like, dude, this is my favorite makeup. This is my favorite lipstick, and I really wanted to use that, but I guess I can't because they whoever vandalized my room because it was actually a ghost. Like, what the heck? So we have Ashley who is moaning and groaning. She's on her YouTube video, like mentioning how like at first this view con was really thumbs up, but then eventually it just became a thumbs down. Well, hopefully you guys are gonna be able to like and whatever onto this video and so on and so forth. Like Ashley's like pleading uh for her audience and stuff like that, and it's really interesting. So we eventually have it to where Ashley is going through and fixing her lights in her room, and every single one of the lights go out anyways. And so we have it to where Ashley is eventually in the pitch black dark, trying to adjust her lights in her room. And we just end up having it to where eventually that Ashley ends up getting sucked into her closet by some ghostly entity. And I guess she is, after this point, being possessed by some ghost. Because eventually we have it to where Ashley ends up sounding bizarrely different, and so on and so forth, through the rest of this movie. So, now we are to switch over to another social media Ash-like person called Megan. It seems like Megan is a good friend with Ashley because it seems like all of these social media Ash-like people like all either know one another or are friends with another because they've been to these cons plenty enough times. So we have this girl named Megan who is between two men right now. It seems that she is going to break it off with some D-bag guy named Ricky. That eventually I'll talk about him when he is taking pictures of himself and doing videos of him in the shower, which is just thumbs up. So we have it to her at first. We have Megan, who is seemingly going and doing all kinds of things with this guy named Dave. Dave is a video gamer, streamer guy. And so we really have it to where we find out that Dave is really just getting used by this Megan girl. Because it seems that Megan has all these rules for Dave, especially when Ricky comes in, to where like Dave can't even look at Megan because if she does, maybe Ricky will find out. Blah 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 blah. So we end up having it to where Dave makes the suggestion to Megan before Ricky shows up and all kinds of stuff. We have it to where Dave makes this suggestion because of how rarely they're going to actually be able to see one another. Dave makes the suggestion if they could film themselves in the bedroom doing their business. And we have it to where Megan is like, yeah, I don't know. I'm not quite sure. So we end up having it to where Megan is undecided. And so we end up finding out that Dave had recorded them doing their bedroom business regardless of what Megan's suggestion was or not. And so we end up having it to where Dave has footage of them doing it, and while they are doing it, eventually he ends up seeing some people coming into the fray of the background, which were actually supposedly ghosts, I would assess or assume. And eventually Dave has this to show to Megan, and eventually once he does bring it to her, bizarrely the phone of which Dave has breaks coincidentally. So anyways, we have it to where Megan is really just unsure, but I think Megan just likes using men. I don't know. I could be wrong, but that's my kind of sense. Is really like Megan is probably just a person that wants her cake and eats it too, kind of thing. To where I think that this, like, we have it to where I think Dave is starting to realize that nothing is really ever going to really truly happen with Megan, and so eventually he just needs to cut himself off. But he doesn't, sadly enough. So we have it to where Ricky shows up as a surprise to Megan, and so we end up having Megan scrambling to text Dave to say, hey, stop calling me, stop texting me, stop whatever, because Ricky is here, and so on and so forth. Dave calls her numerous times anyways, or texts her numerous times anyways, just because he does not care. We have it to where Dave is assuming that Megan is going to break up with Ricky because that's what Megan has said numerous times over, that she's going to dump Ricky for him. We have it to where Ricky is a guy that does evidently some kind of videos in the shower and then eventually takes numerous pictures of himself because I guess he's an Instagram model or something. I don't know. That never was specified, and I don't think it really exactly matters. So we end up having Ricky, who is too full of himself to see what's really going on with his girlfriend. Because he probably assumes that, oh no, like my girlfriend will never dump me or leave me or whatever, because I'm too full of myself to think otherwise. So we eventually have it to where Ricky is taking forever to shower and shave and whatever to make his way down to this one uh, like costume party that they're all doing, or they're just kind of dressing up as whatever just because they can. And so we end up having it to where Ashley is to go back down to the convention to do some camera time to like meet her fans and shoot some photos and whatever. So we have Ashley, who is now zombified out, like her face is white as white could be, and we have it to where Kara is like double checking on Ashley because it's like, dude, you look different. Like, did you party last night? Are you having a hangover? Where are your shoes? Like, I'm gonna go and have to get your shoes for you because I can't believe you're just walking around here without your shoes on. Like, this is crazy. And so we have it to where Kara ends up going up to Ashley's apartment to get uh, or into Ashley's room to get her shoes and such. And we end up finding out again that Ashley's room is just all kinds of crazy and all kinds of mixed up, which leads me to believe that like somebody had a chair on her bed. So I'm like, oh, okay, so this is poltergeist things going on here. Because we had okay, let me finish this and then we'll get back to an early opening of the scene because I felt like the beginning of this movie actually didn't help uh, us understand what is going on with the rest of this film, but so on and so forth. So we have Kira who texts, what the F? Like, did you have a party last night? Like, what did you do? And so Kara ends up making her way back to Ashley to where eventually Ashley is this just zombie-fied Ash-like person making her way down this red carpet-like aisle where people are taking pictures of her, and we end up having Kara who's like, Ashley, like, what's wrong with you? Like, if anything, like, this was actually your favorite part about doing this, how, like, numerous people would just be fanning over you and so on and so forth, and Ashley is just like, yeah, whatever, like, I just, like whatever you just need me to do, blah blah blah. And so we end up having Kara who is assuming that Ashley is either sick or something like something is really wrong with her because we end up having it to her Ashley when going to this apartment or going into this room originally, she was to tell her sister that it's like, dude, I think I'm gonna call it quits with this whole social media thing. Like, I think this is my last huzzah or hurrah because I think I'm done. Like, I think I'm done doing this. Like, I think she must be like so successful that she's able to easily just pull the plug whenever she wants. So now we are to transition in the very early of this scene, or early in this movie, which I completely just skipped around about because I was just like, okay, this just doesn't connect completely with this movie. So in the very beginning of this movie, we have a computer designer that is talking to a computer that has a program called Link Rabbit. And so this guy is on a phone call to some guy that is to tell him that his computer programming is not going to get any funding. Nobody's interested. No one cares. Boo hoo, cry me a river. And so we end up having Guy hanging up with Investor. And so we end up having this developer talking to this computer saying, well, I don't think that this program is going to work because there's no interest, there's nobody who wants this investment to happen, so on and so forth. And the computer is like, well, like, why would you stop this? It's like, if anything, like, we just need to find more friends. If anything, you just need to find more people that can come onto Link Rabbit, and that will get this thing to work. To where eventually all the computer cares about is eventually uh, finding more friends, which I would assume or assess that probably this developer had this computer eventually kill its developer, which this developer I would assess was at this hotel room, which leads us to have every single time whoever was to be connected with this Link Rabbit thing or connected with this uh, computer probably had been killed off, which led this to have all of these souls to be compiled together within this hotel room that Ashley is staying in, which eventually had it to where uh, these ghosts were eventually possessing people and controlling people, and so on and so forth. So we have it to where Ashley is bizarrely rolling her eyes back into her head. It's a really cool looking visual, but it's also like unsettling, I guess, for some people. So we have it to where Ashley is to eventually kind of nix the whole her going to where Kara wants her to go, and so Ashley goes on her own to eventually retrieve some kid to go along with her. And so we have some mother is like, "Oh my God, you found my child!" And so Ashley turns around and she's like, "Well, yeah, like the child ended up running off, and I was trying to go back to some security place somewhere to try to get this child found." Which really, that's not what actually Ashley was actually doing. We have it to where Dave is consistently doing live streams and or videos with Ashley in it, and Ashley has zero interest in talking to Dave or reminiscing about how familiar they are with one another. And so Dave eventually is doing videos and he's like, "Oh well, yeah, like believe me, we are actually friends." Like, it doesn't seem like that, but like, believe me, we're friends. Like, we really have it to where I think Dave is kind of really using, like, trying to use this whole like VidCon thing to maybe boost up his game or whatever, to try to know the most popular people, so he in turn could be able to increase his viewership, subscriptions, whichever, so on and so forth. So this all leads to a party. So we have this bizarrish, Halloweenish, whateverish party. Like, we have it to where Megan is bizarrely wearing two different costumes. Like, one of them is like a furry costume, and another is just some other bizarrish, like, costume that just shows a lot more skin and so on and so forth. So we have it to where Megan goes to this party, and so the entire time she's just texting Dave because Rick is delaying showing there because he has to spray body axe wash all over his entire body and take 12 showers, I guess, because he just needs to look that good. So we have it to where Ricky is delayed making his way to this environment, and so we have it to where Megan and Dave are texting one another, and Megan is just kind of like talking to Dave as if like, because Dave is starting to get very impatient about Ricky like being dumped, and Megan is just kind of like, well, like just give us some time and whatever, and like Dave is becoming very impatient and just getting really annoyed, and so Megan is like, well, hey, like why are you so like annoyed, or why are you so this, why are you so that, and so like that is just kind of escalating this text conversation to just have Dave just want to leave this bar because he's just getting so annoyed with Megan, with her texting and whatever. Because we have it to where Dave is just texting her like nonstop, because it's like, well, like, did you break up with him yet? I'm sure is the questions that he's asking. Because reasonably, it's like Megan was supposed to call it quits with this guy, and what surefire way enough to just do it now, pull the ripcord now, and so on and so forth. So we end up having it to where Megan eventually gets so drunk that eventually she is to go into her room to upload her videos and talk about how drunk she is, and oh, wasn't that a crazy party and whatever. So we end up having Ricky, who is to go off to eventually get suffocated by a balloon string. Let's say that again. Ricky eventually goes off to get suffocated by a balloon string, never making it to the party. And so eventually, when Megan gets a phone call, she assumes that it's quite possibly either Dave or Ricky, and she tells whoever it is on the phone to get her some fries. And it's actually the linked rabbit character, the very technical sounding voice or whatever is, of course, the Link Rabbit character. And so Megan thinks it's somebody else, and she wants them to get them fries. We eventually have it to where Megan is texting Kara, I think, at some point, and like Megan is still like mentioning that like someone is going to get fries for her because this girl is either drunk or whatever. So we have it to where Ricky again strangled with a balloon string, because I can't think of what else he was strangled by. It looked like piano string, because that would justifiably really be strong enough to kind of really like slice through this guy's neck and whatever. But I guess this balloon string is really strong because whatever. So we end up having it to where eventually this turns into eventually having Megan going into Ashley's room, to where, because we have Megan who is in her room, and eventually a ghost is kind of shifting her around as she is drunk, kind of brushing her hair off to the side, like kind of pushing her and whatever, to where recently I would just assess that I'm like, okay, like, so this is the classic ghost maneuver where you have to see like hair moving and whatever, because every ghost thing that they have to try to pull off in this movie, they're going to try to pull off. So we end up having it to where eventually Megan is to go into Ashley's room after, I guess, having Dave giving her some evidence of a ghostly video. And so we end up having Megan and Dave going into Ashley's room because they're like, man, like Ashley was like, she was really weird today, so maybe we should go and check on her. So that eventually leads Megan and Dave to go into Ashley's room, and that eventually leads to Megan eventually getting sucked into this closet, which is eventually to lead Dave to go after her. Um, and eventually we have it to where Dave is seemingly the most sound Esh-like person, because eventually when we have Dave who ends up grabbing onto the shoulder of Megan, we end up finding out that Megan has rolling the back of her eyes and her eyes are starting to bleed. And of course we would assess or assume that she's one of them. And so eventually when Dave turns around, because he's doing this off of some phone camera, it looks like his point of view or whatever, we end up finding out when Dave has turned around that all the other people that have basically died, like Ashley and like Ricky, are sucking Dave in to eventually be killed off like they were all into this closet, to eventually be, I guess, possessed by whatever ghost, whatever thing. Like in a very almost like poltergeisty like manner, like the later movies that like they would just try to like pull off the skin of whatever and like it'd be like and like, yeah, you're not the real so and so person. No, I'm the ghost version of this person. Like it was really in the later versions of the poltergeist movies where it got really weird and really odd. So with that said, really, that's just how this movie ends. We end up having it toward the tail end of this movie where we have, like, the Link Rabbit thing is now in a much more updated computer. And so now I guess it's just in every aspect of anyone that is either in this hotel or any YouTuber, video, whatever personality person. So all this guy needed, this linked rabbit thing, all it needed was eventually to have a social media view con thing to come to its hotel complex, to where eventually it can wreak havoc on every single person that is probably Wi-Fi connected to this hotel. So, kind of really an interesting thing this movie goes into, but it kind of also leaves a lot to be desired, to just be like, well, I'm not quite understanding every single bit of everything. And then eventually we also have it to where at some point they also end up killing off the Warren character that is trying to give people some answers when eventually they call down to the clerk. Because we eventually have it to where eventually Dave ends up calling down to the clerk and he ends up getting Warren. And so Dave is like talking all this kinds of craziness and that he's seen like ghosts and stuff like that. And we end up having Warren, the guy that answers the phone, and is mentioning like, well, is this so-and-so person? Like, did you see this? Did you see a boy? And did you see this? And did you see that? And we end up having the hotel owner of this saying like, I'm sorry, Warren, but you can't take any personal calls. And he ends up just like hanging up on the guy, because I think reasonably this hotel was just trying to avoid any crazy talk, or was just trying to avoid anybody like letting this loose out about like paranormal or ghosts or whatever. And plus, more than likely, they were probably just going to fire this Warren guy anyways, because he was a little bit kooky, or he was kind of like the Shining character that could see or knows about these spirits and something along those lines. It seems like he had seen something, and I wish there would have been some kind of flashbacky moment or something like that where we had this guy be the first one to know of some activities going on, but we knew nothing really about this Warren character. Just the buildup of what was happening with Ashley. And I think that was a giant missed opportunity to not have Warren have some kind of like history or backstory of why this guy was much more aware of these ghost things compared to everyone else. So with that said, I am going to get out of here. I've been talking about this movie long enough. There's something about this that like I like the concept. There's something about this movie like concept wise. I think they could have done way more with this. Um, but also like there's a lot of jumbling things around also going on with this movie where I was just kind of like, huh? I was like, this doesn't quite all connect with one another. Like, is it a computer thing? Is it a ghost in the machine? What is it exactly? There wasn't any true definition of it. Like it just came down to like a Blair Witch ending and a Blair Witch kind of movie, and all done in all done in some hotel complex where I don't feel like there was a 100% answer to much of anything. So with that said, I'm gonna answer my way out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.